My sister tormented me for not being able to hold on to a man. Well, turns out my man never left me, and he's coming back, and now it's time I get a little revenge on my jealous sister. Marriage and relationships are not for everybody, especially me. And this is not because one's flawed or has terrible character. Sometimes it's just what it is. I'm the second child and daughter of my parents. My older sister Olivia and I are beautiful young girls who both lived in the countryside with our parents. After high school, we never went to college. This was something prevalent in the little community where we live. It was common to have the children start working on the farm after they must have graduated from high school, as most, if not all, of the families could not even come close to affording college funds. My sister and I were not allowed to relax by our parents. They were on our necks to get married and start families of our own as we were of age. It was around this time that I met Lucas. Lucas was a year older than I, and his parents were more successful farmers than mine. And he even had a place of his own. As soon as our paths crossed, we began playing our little farm love, and it soon graduated to something quite serious. My parents soon got wind of the whole thing and demanded I stop seeing Lucas. Now, though, they've always been advising that I and my sister get married. I was not surprised that they opposed the relationship between Lucas and me. There had been stories, which I now believe to be true, of Lucas sleeping with the most girls in the community. The moment my parents heard that I was seeing him, they immediately want me to stop and just make sure that I was not added to the list of women he messed up. But they were too late. Lucas and I already began having sex, and I wasn't ready to give him up. My parents did their best to make me separate from him, but the more they tried, the more I grew closer to him. Lucas had promised me marriage, and so he'd previously done that to others too, and when the heat was becoming much in my home, he advised that I just moved in with him. An idea I welcomed quickly. Neither my parents nor my sister could talk me out of it, and my mind was made up. I moved in with him, and that was when I began seeing things as they were. Lucas began evading any discussion of marriage. He would just start saying his womanizing stuff, or a better way to put it would be, he picked up from where he'd left off. It was too bad that he most times did not even try to hide it. He brought some of these girls, which I knew, home, and each time I tried talking to him about it, he became abusive. I remained with him, though. Yeah, I was that stupid. Well, I finally fell pregnant, and though I initially thought that the knowledge of my pregnancy would make him come back to his senses and finally just marry me, nope, he got worse. He threw me out of the house one day, and I had to shamefully return to my parents. I've been living with them ever since, and Lucas hasn't even bothered to check up on me. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Today's story is pretty interesting. The next update didn't even come out for 4 years. That's right, 4 years later, OP logs into the account and posts an update. Well, here it is. It's been 4 years since I've posted, and I'm no more in the countryside with my parents. I'm currently living in the city with my older sister, but I know there's probably questions you would have expected that I would walk down memory lane. After I've gone back to my parents' home after a pregnancy of 3 months, my parents welcomed me. But they were somewhat bitter against me, and I perfectly understood as I deserved it. I mean, I'd thrown their caution to the wind, and now they had to face the shame which I brought upon them. My parents paid a visit to Lucas, but he had absconded to only God knows where. The only option left for my parents was to confront Lucas's people. But his parents had about the whole thing, as it was a small community after all, and they did not want to bear any form of responsibility which their son who had run away from must have left behind. So they claimed their son was older enough to be accountable for his actions, and that was how they washed their hands of the case. I gave birth to 2 twin boys 5 months later, but my children did not take away the pain and anger that my parents felt towards my older sister and me. They somewhat resented us, and my sister and I finally decided we're just going to move to the city, where we planned on starting a life fresh. We informed our parents of our plan, and though they consented, I knew that they just did not want us around. I had messed up the family name, and they believed my sister could do the same. Thankfully, though, they gave us some amount of money that we could use while we sought to make ends meet and stand on our own 2 feet. Starting life in the city as a single mother was very difficult, to say the least. There would be days that I would stay up all night crying and placing curses on Lucas. My only consolation was my twin boys. I knew I had to sit up and fight for them. I went job hunting, and it was very frustrating initially. The few employers whom I've met were only interested in me, and when I turned down their advances, they would claim that they were only trying to do me a favor, as nobody would employ a lady with just a high school equivalent. They were lying. I knew it. I finally got a job at a little grocery store after 6 months of vigorously searching. I had to do some savings for about 3 months before I could enroll my kids at school. My older sister, Olivia, has not been so lucky in securing a job, so I'm the one taking care of all of us from my little earnings at the grocery store, where I work, while my sister does help with the children. I may not be as comfortable as I was when I lived with my parents, as a single lady without kids, but I have peace of mind, and that to me is absolutely priceless. Update number 2. A year's gone by since I've last posted, and there have currently been some recent developments in my life. Nothing much has changed for my older sister, though. She still stays at home as she's yet to find a job, and I think she's becoming rather relaxed about the whole thing. Maybe that is because I'm yet to tell her that it's becoming a real problem, keeping up with feeding myself, my children, and her. All the same, that conversation would need to come up in the future, the very near future. But meanwhile, I'm currently occupied with other matters of the heart. The grocery store where I work is a popular one that's located in a strategic place in the city. And this means that I come in contact with a lot of people. There would be times when customers would come and make passes at me. Some would drop their mobile phone numbers so that I could contact them, but I never did. I've been a victim before, and I'm still paying for my stupidity and disobedience. So I'm not ready to add to my suffering. The ones I find most appalling are ones who would come down there with their wives and even children, but they would use any little opportunity that they had to steal glances at me. They reminded me so much of Lucas. I just had to ignore all of these as they were things that came with the job. I still can't say how a fellow managed to get my attention, to the point of actually getting my number. His name was Noah, and he was the most persistent, or do I say stubborn, of people which received at the store. He kept on pressing for my number until I just finally gave it to him. This is not because he's handsome. Way more handsome than Lucas. No, I was just tired of his persistence. Noah and I finally got to talking, and that's when I discovered he was in the military. He had temporarily came back from a peacekeeping mission. Noah was so sweet to me. Well, experience has taught me that we are always sweet at the beginning, right? I didn't attach myself or attach much meaning to the few times we talked over the phone. I simply had it in the back of my mind that this guy just wanted what every other man wanted from me. But he was not going to get it. Things soon got a little bit serious when he asked me out to go to a date. The moment I informed my sister that I was going on a date with a man, she became rather upset, and I understood her perfectly. She simply told me to be careful, as I was once fell prey to them, as it would be difficult to find a man who would genuinely want to get married to a lady who already had 2 kids from another man. I made it clear to Noah on our first date that I was not getting into his bed. Not that night, not any other night. My clear warning did not discourage him, though. He soon asked me out to go on another date, and though I did not initially admit it, the truth was that I was beginning to fall for him. 6 weeks after we began dating, he asked me to marry him. I was taken back by the request, and we've just been talking for 6 weeks. I found out, though, the military man to be rather gentle on the inside. I liked him, but I had to decline his offer. My sister's warning still resounded in my ears. He persisted, and that was when I told him about my past abusive relationship and my twin boys who were the product. He went cold immediately after I made mention the fact that I had children. I knew it was a lot for him to take in at the moment, and so I walked away. He didn't even bother stopping me. I got home that night, and my older sister, who noticed my sad demeanor, asked me how the date went. I explained to her all that happened, and she said that it proved her point that Noah didn't love me, not enough to be a father to another man's child. I wept. I called in sick the next day, and my boss asked if I took a week to recover. It was the first time that I'd be missing work ever since I got the job. 3 days later, Noah shows up at my house one evening. I was surprised as to how he knew my address, and he said he looked it up from the grocery store where we used to be when he called in sick. And that was how he got my address from a colleague of mine. Noah, in the presence of my older sister, told me that he loved me even though I had 2 kids for another man. He said that he was still willing to get married to me if only I would say yeah. I didn't bother looking in my sister's direction for approval. I immediately said yes, and we got engaged right then and there. We're currently now planning our wedding. Update number 3. Hey guys, it's been a while since I've last updated. Though I'm supposed to be married and settled into my husband's house, the sad reality is that I'm not. I'm still stuck with my older sister. My fiancé Noah was suddenly called up for a COVID mission operation and he had to leave. It meant that our plans had to be put on hold. He told me that the mission was to last nothing more than 3 months and we would be happily married once he got back. It was painful, but I was willing to wait. We spent a lot of memorable times during the few days which we had left, and 2 weeks after he traveled, I discovered I was pregnant with a girl child. I know I said I was not going to let any other guy have his way with me, but Noah was no ordinary guy. He was engaged to me, and I could see his intentions towards my kids and me were real. When my sister learned of my pregnancy, she fell out with me. She claimed that after all I've suffered at the hands of my first lover, who only used me for his selfish desires, I was still reluctant in getting wise. She came for me hard. I told her that if Noah never loved me, he would not come back and get engaged to me right in her presence. I made it clear to her that I trusted that he would keep his word and return to me after these 3 months. My sister just ignored me. As the days went by, we became somewhat distant. After 3 months was up and I was yet to see or hear from Noah, I began to panic. My sister soon approached me in the 4th month and asked me to go get rid of the child. She noted that it was clear Noah knew he was not going to come back, and so he used the issue of marriage to get close and sleep with you. I informed my older sister that I was not going to get an abortion, even if it meant I would become a single mother of 3 children. What started as a quiet conversation soon resulted in a serious altercation. My sister said that I was setting myself up for failure, and I should get ready to suffer when the child finally comes because there's no way she's going to contribute to feeding a child again whose father was nowhere to be seen. I was absolutely offended at her words. Here was the older sister who I've been feeding and taking care of ever since we got to the city. She was the single one with little to no responsibility, while I was a single mother with 2 kids to feed, yet I still fed her every day. I saw it as the right time to talk to her about her joblessness, which had gotten on my nerves for so long. I made her understand that if it were not for the fact that I was working, she would have been long gone. And the fact that she made the statement of not feeding her nephew simply showed that she was an ingrate who did not have my best interest at heart. Besides, the whole money and job issue, how could she encourage me to go and abort a child when she knows that doing so could endanger my life too? What a sister. I told my sister to go get a job, as I was no longer going to be feeding her and all. I mean, she was the older one, and if anybody was to be paying the motherly role, it was meant to be her. Update number 4. It's been 7 months since I've last updated, and I'm currently at the hospital where my daughter, who was born prematurely, is currently fighting for her life. After the altercation with my sister, I began looking to means to reach out to Noah, but there were none. My sister's words were beginning to get to me, and even though I've told her that I'd gladly raise my 3 kids should Noah bail on me, I knew it was not going to be fun. I continued working at the grocery store, and my sister and I have been trying to patch things up between us. She still has not found a job, though, and I'm yet to carry out my threat of watching her starve. I was at work one afternoon in the 7th month of my pregnancy when I suddenly just started bleeding. I was rushed to the hospital where I was told that I was having a premature birth. I got admitted to the hospital and the doctors attended to me. I sent for my sister, and when she arrived at the hospital, I pleaded with her to make the payment for my hospital bill, using my credit card and to equally use part of my savings to take care of my kids. I spent a full week at that hospital, and my sister never again showed up there. I didn't feel bad because she was taking care of my children, or so I thought. My baby girl was finally born, and she weighed just a few pounds. It was discovered that my daughter was having a heart condition. Her life was hanging by a thread, and the doctors claimed that she needed to be operated upon fast. I was willing to do anything just to save her life, but when I was told the cost of the operation, I broke down in tears. It was more money than I've ever made in all my life put together. There's absolutely no way I could pay that amount. The little amount left on me was not going to be enough to cover the cost, but I was at least grateful that the doctors were willing to take it as a deposit. I deposited the money and the surgery took place. After the surgery, my daughter was placed in an incubator, and while she was there, I took the opportunity to leave the hospital and go see how I could raise the money to clear the remaining balance. Besides the fact that I needed to leave the hospital to raise some money, I was equally eager to see my sons. I got home to meet my older sister, who was surprised, but not so pleased to see me. Before I could ask about my children, they both ran out to greet me, as they've heard my voice, and God knows, I almost ran away. They looked nothing close to the children I've given birth to and left in my sister's care before leaving the hospital. They were just skin and bones. I was so mad, just as every mother would be, and I've been in the hospital for days. I was understandably weak, but I had just demanded an explanation from my sister. I'd given her my credit card with part of my savings to use in taking care of my children, so it made no sense that they were looking sickly while she was looking well-fed. My sister said that she had done exactly as I asked her to. I stood there in anger as she claimed that the money which I've left had been exhausted, and so she and the kids had to live off her savings. I knew that was just a lie. There's no way the kids could eat what she ate and look like they did. I was heartbroken and angry, but there was nothing I could do at the moment. If I'd followed my emotions, I'd probably have fought for not minding the consequences, but I was too weak to fight. I just ignored her because I was not sure what the best action to take at the time was. I spoke with my children, and it turned out that the few times they've eaten in the whole week, they were fed junk or leftovers of what my sister ate, scraps. To make matters worse, they have not been to school since the day I left the home. I immediately started going to everyone I knew to seek help. My children needed to eat, and I had some debts to settle at the hospital. I went to the grocery store where I worked, and my colleagues and boss were all glad to see me. But there was little they could do. The money gotten from begging friends and acquaintances was very small compared to the debt that I owed. After thinking about it for some time, I decided to borrow some money from the bank just to settle the debt at the hospital. That's just robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it's not wise because the banks will still come for their money with an accrued interest. While I was waiting for my loan application to be approved, I observed my boys were developing some issues with their health. I had to take them to the hospital where it's confirmed they've developed ulcers as a result of being malnourished. Only God knew how I felt watching the 3 children at the hospital, just as my daughter was beginning to recover from the surgery. My boys were now admitted to the hospital with the money which was meant to clear my daughter's bill. I'm currently stranded at the hospital with the whole of my children, and this is all thanks to my sister. She claimed to have used her savings for my children, but those were just silly lies. During the few days I spent at home, I could see some new dresses and shoes littered in her room, and I just knew that was my money, as she's not worked for even a second since we came to the city. Ah, how wicked can people be? I'd call her an ingrate, and she just proved me right. Update number 5. Final update. It's been a while since I've updated, but I'm as glad as I can be and happy at ending after all. While I was at the hospital with my kids, and pondering on how bad life had turned out for me, I received a surprise. Noah. Noah walked into the room where I was, and I froze. I initially did not know how I should be, happy or sad, or perhaps even angry at him for letting me suffer all that I've done. I broke down in tears the moment he hugged me. It took me a while before I could comfort myself, because I just needed to let my frustration all out. Noah apologized to me for not reaching out since, and he said the mission which he went on taken an unexpected turn, and he was wounded in battle. A slight wound, though. It was after he recovered that he was allowed to go home. He claimed he just got back, neither my sister nor I was at the house, and when he got to the grocery store where I worked, he was told to look for me at the hospital. I believed Noah's story to be true, as he was still in his military uniform. I tried saying something, but I only ended up crying again. A lot of things were just rushing through my head, but I was just glad that my lover was back. He did not abandon me, as I'd feared. I finally got a grip of myself and recounted to Noah how my older sister, Olivia, antagonized me, and my relationship with him right before he even traveled. I spared no detail. Noah was shocked to learn how she used the money which I've given her for the upkeep of my children for herself. He could not hide his anger when he discovered that my kids, who have been out of school while I was at the hospital, had developed an ulcer. It was a result of the wickedness and negligence of my sister Olivia. I believe what got to Noah most was the fact that I've been the one feeding my elder sister in all the years which we've lived in the city. Noah proposed a plan, one which was going to be a suitable reward for wickedness. He asked that we behaved as though all was well. He wanted me to act like I held no grudge against my sister while we nursed our children back to health. I was really glad Noah came back, as he would help out in my financial capacity that he could. And he did. Noah cleared the whole of the hospital bill and the loan which I've collected from the bank. He would come to visit my kids and me every day at the hospital, and I would sometimes go back to his place just to freshen up. All the while, my sister still did not bother to call or reach out and see how I and the kids were faring. She was obvious of the facts that Noah came back. After 2 weeks at the hospital, my kids were doing really well. So the doctors discharged them, though the boys were placed on some form of medication, as an ulcer is not something you treat in a week. At least they gained a few pounds while back at the hospital. Noah took the kids and me home. My older sister Olivia was not happy to see us, but she was shocked to see Noah with us. Just as Noah had suggested, we acted as though there was no ill feelings towards her. But Noah had taken pictures of my children at the hospital just before they put on some healthy weight. And he equally obtained a copy of the hospital records, which showed that my children had suffered from malnourishment as a result of negligence to the point of developing an ulcer. He would use this evidence in no distant time to teach my older sister a lesson. A week after we got home, Noah and I announced to my older sister that we would be getting married. The news brought despair to my sister Olivia because she knew the implications of marriage to Noah. It meant I would be moving out with the kids to live with Noah, and she'd be forced to now start paying her rent. And, well, also fending for herself. She began trying to convince me to postpone the wedding, and she said my children needed time to fully recover before having to go through the rigors of a wedding ceremony and a brand new home. What an excuse. Someone who did not take care of children who were put in her care now suddenly began seeking their welfare. I knew she was just thinking about herself. I simply told her that my children would do just fine, as they've already bonded so well with Noah that they saw him as their own father figure that's been missing all through their life. When it dawned on my older sister that Noah and I were not going to extend our wedding date, she began looking for a job. I found it amusing. All it took for my older sister to stand up and take responsibility for herself was the news of my marriage. Maybe I should have gotten married earlier, huh? My wedding day finally came and my sister was my bridesmaid. Everything went well. It was what I would call a royal wedding. Noah's colleagues in the force were present. He wore his military attire. Everything was just perfect. To be honest, I never really thought I would end up getting married when I came to the city. I mean, my life was so messed up, but the single mother with 2 kids got married to her lover, with whom she shares a daughter. After the wedding ceremony came the reception. There was a lot to eat, a lot to drink. Everyone, including my sister, had a great time. The ceremony was about to come to a close, and it was time to give the vote of thanks. This was, by my estimation, the sweetest part of my wedding ceremony, because it was equally payback time. I began by thanking everyone present there at the ceremony. Then I went on the recount of my life history before them all, how I've been deceived and thought I was going to go through all life alone. I soon turned my whole attention to my older sister, as I began telling everyone of the wickedness that she's shown my kids and me. I informed them that my 2 boys who had joined me at the stand used to be healthier than they were looking. And that's because my sister, who I'd entrusted them to simply ignore. They ignored every bit of them and used the funds I gave her for their upkeep on herself. An action that led my children going down with ulcers. I showed them the hospital reports and receipts, which were proof of what I was saying. You could see the crowd sympathizing with my kids and me, while they were incensed against my older sister, who could not deny their accusation. It came as a rude shock to her because she thought I wasn't angry at her for the misconduct. My husband Noah had secured an arrest warrant for my sister, with the hospital reports and proof of their negligence, which he had gotten earlier. And so, while I was speaking, some police guy who'd been earlier stationed at strategic places at the wedding began moving forward. Once I was done, they put her in handcuffs and began leading her away. I interrupted the process that was my leading sister. Immediately, I came face to face with her, and I gave her a dirty slap. I then told her that the only reason I've waited so long before arranging her arrest was so that she could see for herself that Noah was no scam. I wanted her to see that I've turned out all right, and was about to begin a brand new chapter of my life at my husband's house. I'm currently a married woman who has a family. There's nothing more I could wish for. So this story was a roller coaster. First we had to deal with Lucas, who was abusive and just in general a piece of crap. And then we had to deal with OP's sister, who was just not giving OP a break. Let me know your thoughts on this story, guys. What exactly would you have done if you were in OP's position, and the second guy that you went ahead and went for it with is suddenly no contact and missing? You don't know if he's going to come back or not. At that exact moment, what would you have done? Drop your comments down below, guys. Let me know your thoughts on the story. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's story. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing because Mr. Reddito has daily stories. You can find all my other channels directly below. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.